Welcome back to the podcast Heja Framtiden about topics regarding the future. I'm doing this episode in collaboration with Invest Stockholm and Stockholm Impact Week. And I'm sitting here at Epicenter in Stockholm together with Maria Håkansson, CEO at Swedfund. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
You just delivered a keynote speech here at Epicenter. This is the growth day at Stockholm Impact Week. What have you been addressing this morning?
I have been talking about impact as such, that it's actually not a measurement, that it's a strategic intent. And I've also talked about what I see in the world. What are the main trends? What opportunities, risks and threats do they bring? And how can impact investing be a part of solving that?
And tell us a bit about Swedfund, because it's a government-owned company by the Swedish government. What is your mission and what is the business model of Swedfund?
So the mission of Swedfund is actually to fight poverty by sustainable investments. And we've been doing that for more than 40 years in developing countries. So we invest to create jobs and to address challenges like inequality and climate, but also to increase the access of critical products and services like electricity and healthcare. And we have a business model where the impact is actually our starting point. So what is it that we want to achieve? We have a theory of change saying that these are the things we can contribute with when it comes to capital and competence. And these are then the outputs that we expect. And I think that's extremely important that you also set a goal for that. We have a business model built then on the impact on society, sustainability and financial viability that is fully integrated across our investment process. It's also included in the agreements that we sign with our investees, because what we want to do is, of course, both to manage the risks. You have to remember that we actually invest in some of the most challenging parts of the world. But even more important, it's actually about supporting value creation. And then finally, at the end, we also measure the impact that we have achieved. And our auditors actually audit the data on impact and on sustainability to the same extent that they do on the financial data that we generate.
This is done with tax money, right? Taxpayers' money. And I think many people don't know about this way of conducting impact from the Swedish government side. Many people think of foreign aid as the only source. Do you think social entrepreneurship and this kind of social investing is more important, or does it need to be a balance between them both?
I think there needs to be a balance. And if you look on our role, so yes, it's correct. We are a state-owned company and we have a specific mission. So we are financed by reflows from our portfolio, because when we invest, we normally do that with a time horizon of 8 to 10 years. That also means that we get the money back and then we can invest them again. Then the government has said that what we do is so important, so they actually give us additional capital injections so we can also expand the scope of what we are doing. So I think the kind of investments that we are doing, they're extremely important to actually create the possibilities to get a job. And if you look from a poverty reduction perspective, to get a job is actually the single most important activity in a human's life. At the same time, I mean, this is one area to work with development aid, but in a humanitarian situation or in a humanitarian crisis, of course, then it's different kind of support that is needed. So I think if you look on the development aid, there's many different situations, but this is definitely an important way to create more locally sustainable companies that can provide jobs and increase access to important products and services.
Can you give us some examples of business cases that you have invested in?
So one example is a company called African Rivers that we work with, and they have a presence then in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Angola and Uganda. And they actually work with providing capital and credits to small and mid-sized enterprises. And again, these are markets where that's really, really scarce, but an opportunity for companies actually to get financing and then to grow and to employ. Another one is a digital platform we have, which is called Kasha, that is in Rwanda and Kenya. And they provide access to contraceptives, menstrual protection, and also other products related to sexual and reproductive health. Those are in many cases products that are created, or connected with a stigma. So this is a digital platform which makes it easier to actually order, and it also provides some kind of advisory services related to these products.
I know on the stage now there's a panel discussing the measurements of impact investing. Is that an obstacle or a challenge in this sector to actually know what you're going to measure and how to measure it and benchmark it to other investments?
I think that's a huge challenge. First of all, I think it's important to remember that impact has to be the result of a conscious strategic decision. It cannot be CSR. So you need to know what you want to achieve and then measure it. But also there is a challenge. There are not so many standardized frameworks to measure, which means that the information becomes fragmented, costly, and unreliable. So standardization is an important part. The other thing is, so if you get an impact number, what's your insight from it? Do you know if it's a good or bad? If you look on financial information, I think we all have fairly easy to say if this is a good or a bad number, but for impact it's not the same thing. So I think it's both important to create a standardization, but also actually to contextualize it, to be able to give it the same importance as the financial information, because that's what's required if it's going to be left, right and center of the decision making.
You work with a few strategic areas, right? It's health, energy, climate, and
financial inclusion.
Financial inclusion. Why have you chosen these 3-4 topics specifically?
We have chosen it based on, of course, our mission, but also from the owner directives and targets that we have on what kind of areas we should target, which is then increased gender equality, it's climate change, it's job creation, and also areas where we see that we have competence and can contribute. So in energy and climate, we do all kinds of renewable energy, on-grid and off-grid, but also wider climate solution around waste management, water, forestry. Financial inclusion, well, that's really about increasing the access to capital for small and mid-size entrepreneurs and also for micro-entrepreneurs. And in healthcare, we do some specialist clinics, we do general clinics, but we mostly focus now also on digital kind of e-health solutions. And then we actually have a fourth area where we are doing business development, which is then in the area of food security, to see how can we actually do even more to address this area.
Can you give us some numbers? I mean, when you talk about measuring impact, how do you measure your impact? And can you give us some figures from last year?
Absolutely. So if you look on the portfolio from a job perspective, so our companies generated 250,000 direct jobs, almost 1.5 million indirect jobs, which is a result then of increased access to electricity or through supply chain. 60% of our investments qualify as gender investments, meaning that they are targeting companies funded, led by women or with a large share of women in the workforce, or products and services addressing women. We have generated almost 11 terawatts of renewable energy, more than 1 million patient visits, and we have increased access to capital for more than 500,000 small and mid-sized enterprises and 880,000 micro-entrepreneurs. So I think we really can achieve an impact, and the important part is also that these companies need to be financially viable, and more than half of them actually show growth and are profitable. And from a Swedfund perspective, we get the return on our portfolio of almost 5%, which is extremely important. That's a proof of that the companies we create are viable, but also a possibility for us to get the money back and be able to invest them again.
And it's mainly Sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Asia you're investing in.
That's correct. So we have a little bit more than 60% in Sub-Saharan Africa, and then we do selected parts of Asia, which is then, of course, the most challenging and vulnerable countries that we focus on.
And you're part of something called GIIN, or GIN, Global Impact Investing Network. What is the purpose of that network, and what are you working for?
Yeah, so GIN is really a champion for impact investing, and I'm a member of the board. So what they're doing is really both to develop different set of standardized metrics, but also trying to make sure that it's contextualized, that there is data from different sectors to increase comparability. It's also about defining how can you then integrate impact into your business processes, and also providing forums for different kinds of investors. And I think the cool part with GIN is that it's non-profit, and it actually is able to convene so many different types of investors. So it can be large asset owners, small DFI investors, or a large American company, and we can all find solutions and part of the GIN, really trying to be the champion on how you can work with impact investing.
And you come from a long background at Ericsson. What have you brought from that experience into this sector?
Well, I have a long experience of working with finance, with mergers and acquisition, with business models and digitalization. And for me, it was fantastic to see that the experience I have of working with that globally for many years is also something that I can utilize in a company where the mission is actually to fight poverty by sustainable investments. And I think it's a privilege to be able to work in an organization that has that mission, and also to lead the fantastic team in Swedfund.
I usually ask my guests, what is your best tip for making the world a better place in the future?
Well, I think there is one thing, as I said today, I think it's extremely important to actually understand the situation. And then I think you need to find a way to be both humble, but also to have ambition. And I think the partnerships will be a very important way going forward. But really to understand the situation and how you can contribute and make it part of your business.
Do you have any podcast or reading tips?
I was thinking about the podcast, and I think there is one podcast that is Om Africa, which is some Swedish journalists that actually bring stories about Africa that normally don't reach media. And then there's one called Utblick, which is from Utrikespolitiska Institutet, which I think provides a very interesting perspective on the world.
Who do you think I should interview?
Well, I've thought a lot about that. So I think from my perspective then, someone like Graça Machel, who is then, she's been the first lady both of Mozambique and of South Africa. She has a lot of experience and understanding on the perspective of women and of children and how you can really work on improving that. So that could be one. But then I think it's also, when we talk a lot about impact, I think research is really an important part to be able to prove the things and to develop frameworks. And there's a very good researcher at Stockholm School of Economics called Emma Sjöström, who I would recommend. She very much works with also the sustainable investments in Sweden, and I think she can provide an interesting perspective.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria Håkansson from Swedfund.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we are broadcasting from Stockholm Impact Week at Epicenter. This is a growth day. Thanks to Invest Stockholm for doing this together with Heja Framtiden. My name is Kishan von Essen. Check out hejaframtiden.se for more information about this podcast. Thank you for listening.